Well, when I was 13 years old, my aunt and uncle had a close encounter with a UFO, and then um, more than 2 years later underwent hypnosis. They had loads of physical evidence that something had occurred, missing time. It was the first scientifically investigated case of alien abduction in the United States. And, that part of it was investigated after the hypnosis, but there was a lot of conscious recall and evidence prior to them ever having hypnosis. So I learned about that on the day that it happened.
Well, hey everybody, welcome back
Hey everyone.
to Generation X Paranormal. I'm Logan.
And I'm Nicole.
Guys, if you look at the title and you look at everything that we have coming up for this show, my goodness.
I've been very excited to speak with this guest for a long time.
Absolutely. And look, it's literally probably one of the biggest cornerstone incidences in ufology.
Agreed.
First recorded American alien abduction, or should you just say abduction?
Yes.
It literally is one of the most historic stories out there. And of course, we're talking about Betty and Barney Hill. And today we've got the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. She's fantastic. What can you tell us about Kathleen Marden?
So Kathleen Marden is the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, who had a close encounter in UFO abduction in New Hampshire's White Mountains. So as a family member, Kathleen gained firsthand knowledge of Betty and Barney's UFO encounter on the day they arrived home, and 2 days later, she visited the Hills' home and saw the evidence. She's devoted years to painstaking investigation of the Hills' anomalous events and archival research on their UFO abduction. She is also the trustee of Betty's estate, and she selected her aunt and uncle's historical records for a permanent archival collection.
Yeah.
And she's a part of a MUFON. I mean, she's trained in so many things. I mean, there's so many things that she's done in her lifetime. She's an author of several books.
Yep.
She's appeared as an on-camera expert on more than 60 television and video productions and innumerable radio shows and podcasts.
Yeah.
And she's lectured at conferences across the United States and in several foreign countries. So she's an expert on at least on Betty and Barney Hill.
For sure. And ufology in general.
Yeah. I mean, and we're going to kind of focus on the one book about Betty and Barney Hill today, because you need several more podcasts on all the other books she's written. But I would definitely check all of them out. But let's talk to her.
Yeah, let's talk to her about Captured, and let's talk to her about the incredible incident. Well, hey, Kathleen, welcome to Generation X Paranormal.
Hello. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely a difference when, we research the paranormal. We have a lot of guests on with the paranormal. But today's topic and what we're going to talk about, I can't think of too many instances where something completely redefines a particular type of paranormal, or even just humanity in general, right?
Yes.
But sort of before we get into that, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and kind of what's gotten you to this point?
Well, when I was 13 years old, my aunt and uncle had a close encounter with a UFO, and then more than 2 years later underwent hypnosis. They had loads of physical evidence that something had occurred, missing time. It was the first scientifically investigated case of alien abduction in the United States. And, that part of it was investigated after the hypnosis. But there was a lot of conscious recall and evidence prior to them ever having hypnosis. So I learned about that on the day that it happened. because it was after midnight on the 19th. So
Mhm.
they went home, and that afternoon they called my mother. I was arriving home from school. And from that day forward, I was just fascinated with what had happened.
Sure.
And I was a big fan of Nancy Drew, Girl Detective,
Yeah.
and modeled myself after her. I wanted to know everything about this. So I followed it. I met all of the big players in the investigation of this. And then I went off to college. And in college, I learned to be dismissive. So skeptical that I was dismissive, particularly from the psychology department. And just kind of kept it secret. What I
Sure.
knew for a long time, tried to push it down, tried to rationalize that it must have been something different than what Betty and Barney thought. You know,
Right.
even though my family had some paranormal activity in his house after that.
Hmm.
You know, so they sort of go hand in hand.
Yes, they do.
And so I suppressed this information for many, many years. And then, you know, I was a professional. I started out in social work, and then I was an educator, education services coordinator. But I had sort of an epiphany in about 1990 or so. Um, I had already been studying under Betty for about 5 years. Then she was my mentor. I wanted to know everything that she knew about UFOs and ET contact, abductions, and everyone in the field. And after that, I decided to join the Mutual UFO Network and become a field investigator. This was against my aunt's advice. She told me that because she did not join organizations, scientists were willing to cooperate and work with her, as
Hmm.
were former military officers. But
Interesting.
they did not want her to be part of an organization.
Hmm.
But well, I said, "Well, you know, I have a mind of my own. I'm not going to do whatever you tell me to do." So I joined, and I learned to become an investigator officially, and began taking offices in the organization. And over the years, I was the director of field investigator training. I was the director of abduction research, which then became experiencer research, worked on a major research project with more than 500 experiencers of ET contact or abduction, and really learned and grew with the organization. I'm glad that I was a member.
Absolutely.
But then they sort of restrict what you can investigate, what your interests are. They don't want you to be part of anything that might embarrass them. And that includes paranormal investigation.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So I became independent in terms of that and in terms of my investigation of ET contact experiences or alien abductions. So I've done many, many independent investigations as well, where the two of these phenomena are coinciding
Sure.
in investigations, my investigations. So that was very, very interesting. I was able to engage in research and investigation that is sort of taboo in the UFO field, and probably taboo in the paranormal field as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
I know that people who engage in that kind of activity are oftentimes scoffed at or lose their reputations. But
Yep.
my primary driving objective was to learn what was going on. If you don't seek, you will not find.
Yes.
And I
That is
wanted
correct.
answers. I didn't want to be on the treadmill of doing the same thing over and over again and leaving out important evidence that I believe should be included.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that needs to be the title of this episode.
Exactly.
You won't find it if you're not looking for it.
Exactly. That's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very true.
That what a fantastic beginning, and just it's funny, we talked a little bit before we started about the independence part of it, and it's so important. Granted, being part of a system and being part of learning and everything, there's a lot of quantitative things that are great about it.
Mhm.
But there are also some things that kind of handcuff you a little bit and keep you from, sort of having the experience that you want to have. But no, that's well, I tell you, it's funny. It hits us hard enough to where we completely understand exactly what you're talking about.
And how
I think
things
a
can
lot of
happen when,
people.
and
Go
how
ahead.
things can happen when you're younger, and then you ignore them for a while, and then they seem to resurface in adulthood. That was another key takeaway that you said. Is
Yes.
the same thing happened with us.
It
So,
sure
and
did.
it does happen to a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have found that. Yes.
Mhm.
And of course, being an author and having been able to document so much and having that, I would imagine it had some cathartic effect to everything too, being able to kind of put it down in your own words, right?
Absolutely, and it was based on years of deep, deep investigation of boots on the ground,
Mhm.
retracing the entire route that my aunt and uncle took that night, um, based upon their statements under hypnosis. So I uh, had just about memorized them
I'm sure.
by that time. And as I was driving with my husband along, looking at the scenery along the route, I was seeing what Betty and Barney had described in their
Yes.
hypnosis sessions. So it really brought a deeper meaning to it. And I could see that their memories were very sharp on
Mhm.
what had occurred, where they stopped, and what happened and at what point.
That's
There are
perfect.
many people who claim just the opposite, but that is not borne out in the facts, in the investigation. You must investigate.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And we're definitely going to get into that because it's funny, before when we agreed we're going to have the episode and when we're going to do it, I remembered I've been to New Hampshire. I've been to that area, and I'm like, okay, let me remember and recall that. And it's funny, I've got pictures of me in Colebrook. We ate pizza in Colebrook. This was for work,
Mhm.
and we drove from Colebrook to Portsmouth, and we actually stopped at Francona Notch. We kind of did a few things. A buddy of mine, when we were at work coming down, and I wish back then I kind of knew what I knew now, because I'd been like, I would have loved to have kind of done what you did. And it's amazing because even in, was it 2019, when you make that drive, granted there's probably some more development than in 1961,
A
but
lot more. Yes.
right,
I'm
but
sure.
even then, I was like, man, it can get pretty sparse out there. There's some definite areas where you're just like, man, I could see where what an interesting place to have this happen. But with that, for our listeners who may not know, and again, it's such a monumental case. But of course, we're talking about the UFO or the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill. And for those who may just only know the basics of the story, for our listeners, can you kind of briefly walk us through some of the events that happened that September 9th, 1961?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And I want to divide this into two parts. One part is their conscious recall, what they always remembered,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
then what they forgot.
Okay. Great.
So
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
they had decided not to spend the night in Montreal and to drive home through the White Mountains to their home on the seacoast at Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And they knew that they would arrive by about 2 in the morning, maybe a little bit later. They were very familiar with upstate New Hampshire. They'd been vacationing there many times. And over the years of their courtship, and so they were just driving through, having a good evening, when all of a sudden, Betty's eyes were drawn to a new light in the sky. And as she watched it over time, it grew larger and larger. And then it started to bounce back and forth in the sky, moving in an erratic pattern. And then it hovered next to the Old Man of the Mountain, which fell off the mountain in 2003, but it was there in 61, and it was hovering right next to its profile. Profile is 48 feet from forehead to chin.
Wow.
And she said that this craft was at least 1.5 times the length of the profile. It was lighted on only one side, and it was rotating. So you could see the sort of blip, blip, blip because it was dark as it rotated. It then started to move, bounce back and forth in the sky. Barney compared it to a yo-yo, bouncing out and then bouncing back. Today, the military pilots have compared it to a ping pong ball. But I think that's probably the same motion that they were observing.
Sure.
So then they exited Franconia Notch, and they were in a tourist area known as the Indian Head area of North Lincoln. They were driving along. They saw a man in the window of one of the cabins at the Indian Head Resort as they passed by it, and the craft was moving in closer and closer, and suddenly it swooped ahead and stopped beside the highway. Betty and Barney had to stop the car, or they would be directly underneath the craft, and so they stopped right in the middle of the road, and the craft was now descending to within 200 feet of them and to the right of their vehicle. So that would have been to the west. Barney grabbed the binoculars, which he had on the seat, got out of the car, and looked up at this craft. As he was looking, he could see that it was silent, it was hovering. There were bright, bright blue-white lights shining from the windows. And then he stepped back, and when he did, the craft passed over the highway and descended even lower. Now it was only about 50 feet above the ground and 100 feet away, or 100 feet above the ground and 50 feet away. I'm not sure about that one.
Sure.
But he then held the binoculars up to his eyes, and he saw figures looking back at him. In the first report that Betty wrote to the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, she described those beings dressed in black, shiny uniforms that frightened Barney so badly that he developed a mental block about their appearance, except for he could remember the black uniforms and their movement, that kind of thing. He could not remember their faces.
Right.
He was pulling the binoculars away from his eyes, shaking his head and saying, this is impossible.
Sure.
Right.
He didn't believe that anything like this could possibly exist.
Right.
And then all of those beings on the craft, except for one that remained at the window, turned in unison and walked toward what appeared to be some kind of panel. When they did this, their arms went up. At this point, Barney could see them from the tops of their heads to about their knees. When their arms went up, little red fin-like lights on fin-like structures started to slide out of the craft, only 2 of them on each side. And something started to drop down out of the bottom. When this occurred, Barney became terrified. He'd been looking up at the expression on the face of this one at the window and felt that he had to get out of there or he was going to be captured. He pulled the binoculars away from his eyes so forcefully that he broke the leather strap and went screaming back to the car to Betty that they had to get out of there or they were going to be captured. Within a few blocks, they heard a series of code-like buzzing sounds, striking the trunk of their vehicle. It vibrated, and they felt a tingling sensation pass through their bodies. As Barney, as we back up a moment, was running to the vehicle, he looked back and saw that it was moving in his direction. So we now know that it was the craft over the top of the vehicle.
Right.
When they arrived home, they found new shiny spots in the precise location where they heard those buzzing sounds. They had not been there the day before, regardless of what all the skeptics want you to believe.
Sure.
They're not correct. I saw these spots. My family saw the spots. There was a electro or magnetic field around these spots, and there was no prosaic explanation for them. They were not weather spots. There was not a battery in the trunk of the car to cause the compass needle to spin. It was a true anomaly.
Right.
They continued to speed down the highway, and then mysteriously they found themselves 30 to 35 miles down the highway. They were on a different road. They were on the main highway, which had only been constructed a certain amount of north.
Sure, right.
And so they were no longer on U.S. Highway 3. They were now on Interstate 93.
Fascinating.
Betty said to Barney, "Now do you believe in flying saucers?" And he said, "Oh, Betty, don't be ridiculous." He wanted to give her a hard time. He wanted her to forget about all of this and just go on with their lives.
Right.
They did remember finding themselves on a dirt road lined with tall trees. They remembered a roadblock. There was something unusual about that roadblock. They remembered a fiery orb that appeared to be moving and then sitting on the ground. And then the next thing they knew, they were back on the highway with all of these memories and questions.
Was there, and I don't know if I remember reading this right, but wasn't their dog with them too? Or
Yes, their dog Delcy, who is pictured in that picture with them, was with them.
You're right.
That was
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
It's just amazing, and it's funny. I'm so glad you brought up the car, because having done the research on it, it was on the trunk of the car, if I remember right, where the
spots.
And
how big were the spots?
They were about the size of quarters. They were all the same size. They were shiny. Some people say that it took the paint right off the car. That's not true. It was as if you laid a template down and you just polished that area, with all of these little spots that were scattered around on the trunk.
Now, Betty reached out to, what was the organization called that had given her the idea of putting a compass on those spots. Is that correct?
The organization did not suggest that.
Okay.
She had called my mother.
Oh,
we had a neighbor who was a physicist. And my mother called the physicist. And it was the physicist who, for some reason, knew more than we knew about it. and said, if you tell Betty if she has a compass to go out and see how the needle reacts.
Sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing because there's so much information. I'm sure we'll get into it later, but there's a lot of accountings of ufology where it completely disrupts the magnetic field around things.
Well, it's the same with in paranormal investigating with
paranormal
ghosts. It's the same thing that you test the EMF field.
Yeah, it's just so fascinating how I know we'll get into more of this. I just find it's just amazing. But in your book, Capture the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, you obviously kind of go through this whole thing that we just went through now, but there's a lot of physical evidence. But what do you consider kind of the most compelling of that evidence?
To me, it's the extensive analysis of Betty's dress, scientific analysis. There have been anomalous findings over the years, meaning that they found something highly unusual, but they could not explain precisely what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And some people dismiss that as being no evidence at all. They don't understand science because the
Right.
scientists explained this to me.
Okay.
Also, there was a DNA analysis on a spot that appeared to be blood on the lining of Betty's dress. It was not deposited from the outside. It was only on the lining, and it came through from the area of her navel. Now, what's important about this is she remembered having a very large needle jabbed into her navel area, and that caused her excruciating pain. So the question is this fluid from Betty's body?
Right.
The scientific analysis discovered that, yes, it is Betty's DNA. It was fluid from her body, but they could not discount the possibility that it could have been sweat. Now, there were no sweat stains anywhere else on her dress, but being scientific, they always have to leave room for something else.
Of course.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that,
Wow.
and I guess knowing the case, I would honestly agree with you. That happens to be probably the most significant because if memory serves, she even put that away for years. She didn't even go near the dress for 3 years, some of that
Yes,
nature.
yeah, it was a while.
Right.
Mhm.
So
And to not wash it, like she knew
Right.
she needed to keep it
right, and
as it was.
and
Yeah.
it also, I think, didn't she even take the food and all the stuff that they traveled with? She wouldn't bring it in the home. Like she had this knowledge that she knew something profound had happened.
Yes, yeah, and she and Barney were afraid that they'd been contaminated. The craft
Mhm.
was so close, and they had more memories when they arrived home than they had immediately over the following weeks.
Absolutely.
Their memories faded, they said, under hypnosis. They
Mm.
remembered that they had faded. Now, they didn't remember the fading initially.
Right.
But, very strange, very strange. There was something, I believe, that was toying with their memories. There was mind control being employed with Betty and Barney. And I like to look upon this as being the non-humans'
Mhm.
Mhm.
attempt to protect themselves, but
Sure.
also their attempt to protect Betty and Barney from the trauma that people experience initially.
Right.
100%.
Yeah.
But
And
their
it's
memories and that they made a mistake. Their memories, the physical evidence,
Mhm.
didn't do the job. Betty and Barney saw too much. They remembered
right,
too much.
which is wonderful for us, but I'm sure it was very traumatic for them. And I know,
Can't imagine.
yeah, we'll definitely get into that here in a minute. But I think one of the things that as far as physical evidence that I find so interesting was the star map, Betty's star map. And it's funny because I think it has come up in even sci-fi movies, and it seems to just have this life of its own that keeps going. And if I remember, it's the Zeta Reticuli, I think it is what she
Yes.
had. Can you kind of briefly explain that? Because I know we're getting into a few more other things, but I find that really fascinating.
Yes. Well, under hypnosis, Betty remembered asking the leader where he was from. And he produced this star map out of something that was in the wall. It was three-dimensional. It was like looking out a window. The stars were various sizes and colors and glowing. And under hypnosis, Dr. Simon gave her the post-hypnotic suggestion that she would be able to go home and sketch this if she could remember it accurately. And fortunately, she had a photographic memory.
Hmm.
And if it didn't bother her too badly, she did, over a 2-week period, sketch it. First, um, just sketching it, and second, trying to use her conscious recall at that point to change it around, to question herself.
Sure.
Is this what she really did see? And so in the first book that was ever published on this, after the violation of confidentiality that took their story public, this happened in 1965, it went around the world, it was devastating to Betty and Barney.
I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Well, they were involved in the civil rights. They'd been invited guests to Lyndon Johnson's inauguration. Those were the days before you had to pay to go. You were paid according to your merit. Barney had received numerous awards for his work and in civil rights and social justice, helping people in his community. And so it was a terrible thing to happen to Betty and Barney.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and that's something that I think I don't want to say it gets missed, but it's a part of this story that doesn't always get its day in the sun, so to speak. Betty and Barney Hill were civil rights activists. They were, like you said, they were very motivated by their time and what was going on in it. And reputation was probably of the utmost importance to them because of this.
Yes.
And this incident, and this happens a lot with paranormal and anything else, people who have these incidences, when they report it, I think a lot of people realize that there's at a complete loss to them. A lot of things that happen, credibility gets stymied. You get questioned. You become that couple. You become that person, and it's always, I guess, difficult for people to understand that there's nothing to gain here. It's not like they were going to get some prize or some award.
Nobody has ever made a fortune
exactly
in the UFO field. You're lucky if you can just scrape by.
Exactly. Breaking even would be winning. But it misses the human part of what they represented and who they were. And I think that unfortunately sometimes gets kind of gleamed. So I'm really glad you brought it up, because it was something I did want to bring up at some point. And
I should get back to the star map.
Yeah. No, please, by all means. Yeah.
I sort of got a little off track there.
No,
but
me too.
So Marjorie Fish, who was an amateur astronomer, a member of Mensa, meaning that she was a genius. She was a school teacher at the time. Saw Betty's star map in the first book ever published. And she saw that. She was skeptical, but she decided that if this place actually did exist, she might be able to find it. So she went to the university. She had to sit there and copy all the star data, all the distance data, the categories of the stars, all the characteristics of the stars out 54 light years from the sun in every direction. And this was the days before we had computers.
Right.
She had to go home and build three-dimensional models and do the mathematical calculations to know precisely where to place every star in its proper location in our local galactic neighborhood out 54 light years. She cut it into 14 segments, and still she didn't have a match. She didn't find a match until our scientists made technological progress. And we had better distance data. And when we had that better data, she rearranged the stars in these models, and finally she found a match. And she found that all the stars on Betty's map were sun-like stars, whereas only 5% of the stars in our local galactic neighborhood, out 54 light years in all directions, are sun-like. And all the stars, sun-like stars, in that volume of space are on Betty's map. What a coincidence. More than a coincidence.
Exactly.
It couldn't be a coincidence.
Right.
And the scientists who looked at this, who analyzed this, who vetted Marjorie's work and said that it was accurate, discovered that if we were on Zeta Reticuli and we were exploring space, the stops on the map connected by solid lines would be the routes that our astronauts would take from star system to star system in their space exploration until they would finally find our solar system.
Wow.
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 Yeah, that right there is, I know there's a lot of hearsay with certain things with people who have had these encounters, but when scientific data like that can back something like that up,
Absolutely, yes.
to me it's like, okay, what else do you guys need? what else do we need to prove to you? And the fact that they even brought, I remember the movie now, it's in Prometheus, one of the alien movies that they did. It's even being used to this day. It's just, it's fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
so kind of moving on from the map. I'm sorry, was that all about the map?
That's enough.
Okay.
It's all in my book, Captured, the Betty and Barney
Yes.
Hill
Mhm.
UFO Experience. I updated it in 2021 with even more scientific evidence than I told you about.
We own it and we
It's more
celebrated it.
Yeah.
compelling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
So kind of moving to the second part, I think is where we're kind of probably heading here. The regression sessions. Now they were conducted by Dr. Benjamin Simon, and I know even to this day there's some controversial parts to it. I know some people, it's been diced apart, it's been taken apart because of it being such an important case. But from your research, what safeguards did he put in to kind of avoid suggestion?
Dr. Simon was a leader in his field in hypnosis. He had developed a technique that was used with veterans returning from World War II highly successfully.
Mhm.
And Barney had psychosomatic symptoms that were induced by his trauma over his observation and conscious recall of these non-humans and all of the evidence that went with it. So he was the primary patient. Dr. Simon took Betty and Barney separately for a period of 6 months. Well, it was 4 months separately, 2 months together, so they could listen to what they each stated, because he had reinstated amnesia at the end of each session, so they couldn't contaminate one another's information. So
Right.
this paved the path for my comparative analysis of their separate statements, which I wrote about in the book, and also have a DVD of their comparative statements. So, in addition to that, Dr. Simon employed techniques to try to get to the truth. That, you will tell me the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I don't want you to leave out anything. Everybody leaves out things. Everybody, whether you're under hypnosis or not,
Sure.
will censor the information,
Mm-hmm.
especially if it's embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people I've studied hypnosis both academically and was a certified hypnotherapist and quantum healing hypnosis practitioner. So I've read the academic studies that were available. I've written papers on them, and there can be problems if the hypnotist has an agenda and pushes a person in a certain direction, or gives choices. Did you do this or did you do that?
Right.
That can lead to confabulation. That is
Mhm.
not a good way to do hypnosis if you want to get to the truth.
Absolutely.
So a person can lie under hypnosis, and Dr. Simon wondered if Barney was lying at certain points. It was only that Barney's memory was not completely there at the point that Dr. Simon was asking him to remember it. So he remembered a few things incorrectly. But then in the next session or a session later, he remembered it accurately and as Betty had remembered it. So I was able to clear that up to remove any inconsistencies, because the inconsistent statements were only due to memory problems with Barney.
Okay.
So over time, Dr. Simon tried to dissuade Betty and Barney from believing that any of this is true. He actually gave him suggestions to Barney very strongly that it was all from Betty's dreams. She'd had only 5 dreams. Some of them had information that she had conscious recall for, some information that was of a dreamlike nature. And they happened just as she was waking up in the morning. Barney was working nights at the time, so he wasn't sleeping with her. So, was this a possibility? Was it dreams? Well, I did a comparative analysis of their statements vis-a-vis Betty's dreams, dream account. She left 5 pages of her dream account, detailed.
Wow.
And no, it was not the dream account. Betty and Barney had a real experience. There's ample evidence everywhere to state that they had a real experience. As much as the authorities, as much as the government, as much as the military, as much as the skeptics and the debunkers, as much as so many people would wish this could not be true.
Yeah.
I found significant, compelling evidence, and the scientists did as well. My background's in social science, but the physical scientists did as well.
Yeah. And that's very well said, because knowing the case and knowing kind of the stop gaps and people, the arguments and they've made of it, I'm so glad you kind of ironed that out, because it is so important. The things that they were able to remember that came out through regression and all these other things are just phenomenally important, that I hate to see, bad evidence or bad science or people who have the wrong impression. They miss out on some of the most important parts of their incident, and it's great that you were able to go back and take more of a scientific approach to it and make sure that it did change the opinion, or hopefully changes people's opinions on what those sessions were and how they were conducted. So that's fantastic.
I say that without evidence, you only have an interesting story.
Of course.
You really have to focus on the evidence. You have to do a thorough investigation. You have to have a scientific analysis of the evidence that can be analyzed.
100%. I mean, and that goes for anything
yeah.
really. I mean, it's either just a really great story or you actually have something. And
if you're trying to prove it, at least.
Right. If you're definitely trying to prove it.
Yes.
Now, of course, you mentioned the military, and I do have a military background, so I laugh at this tongue in cheek because it makes me laugh. But what role did the Air Force and Project Blue Book play? Now, I know the answer to this, but I don't know that our audience does. But what role did the Air Force and Project Blue Book play in the investigation, and what was their ultimate conclusion?
Well, Betty and Barney made a report the day after they arrived home. The night of their experience, that's the 20th of September, the night of 20th of September 1961, Betty spoke with my father's best friend, who had been the chief of police in the small town of Newton, New Hampshire. And he had received a message from Pease Air Force Base that if anyone had reported a UFO, they should be advised that they needed to report it to Pease. So, I mean, it was too late. That night, so they waited until the next day to report it. They called Pease, and they each made their report. They were interviewed by Major Paul Henderson, and he wrote a report. He wrote a report about the erratic movement of the craft. He wrote about how when it swooped down over their vehicle, it was as large as a dinner plate held at arm's length. Keep in mind that the full moon is the size of an aspirin held at arm's length.
Exactly.
So this was huge. This wasn't some distant light in the sky, as the disinformants would want you to believe. This was really close up and personal and traumatizing.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, look at Barney's testimony. I mean, he literally ripped leather across his neck from those binoculars. I mean, they were petrified, and
Can't blame them.
no.
Yeah, and years later, Betty said that she leaned out the window and said, "Hi, boys," and was really, she had to have been joking. Either that or she was getting a little dementia, but that was not what happened. If you listen to the hypnosis tape, she was weeping. She was so terrified at that point. It was.
Oh, what a great footnote. That sounds hilarious.
You know what it reminds me of? The Independence Day movie when he says,
that's right.
"Hello, is it Hello Boys?" or something?
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway,
and UFO research has really kind of changed a lot. But what in their case, what has been reinforced with their case, with where we are now with some of this research?
oh boy.
That's a big
loaded
research,
question.
I mean, the research has expanded so broadly, so widely. Particularly since the military whistleblowers have come forward and sworn under oath that they are telling the truth.
Yes.
And that's extraordinarily important because these are highly credible individuals, and then still they're harassed, their lives are threatened if they're talking about non-human tissue, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's still surprising having a background in it. I was in naval aviation. I wasn't an aviator myself, but that's the thing I try to impress upon people is these people that come out, you don't realize what they're doing to themselves, not just on a human level, but what it's doing to their credibility, what it's doing to everything they've worked hard for up to this point in the military. And it's something that, again, they're not gaining anything out of this. They're not going to get, they're not going to be billionaires from telling a story like this.
I had a case, unfortunately, where there was a military pilot who was operating a small airport. He had been a commercial pilot, and then he retired and he was operating a small airport doing plane repairs, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
He had a UFO close encounter. He started taking photographs, that sort of thing. And when he reported this, and it was in a newspaper, just a small local newspaper, and then it was investigated by the Mutual UFO Network, he ended up losing his license, losing his livelihood, losing his airport, losing everything.
Jeez.
That's terrible.
It is terrible. Something has to be done about this. This is not at all right.
No,
this is really malicious, vicious.
Yeah. And it's something that in the paranormal community, we all kind of know these things. We look at these things maybe from a different objective because of the things that we study and we investigate. But for the I wouldn't say the normal public, because that's not what I'm trying to say. But for everyday public that aren't in this
24/7,
it's so hard to impress upon them that the narrative has got to change.
Yes.
When you look at UFO and ufology, not just ghosts and everything else that we cover, it spans such a large spectrum of people from different beliefs, from different cultures. I mean, it is a human experience. And the closer we get to understanding that, you hear stories like what you just said, and hopefully someday we can get to that. At least the understanding that, hey, I may not necessarily believe what you're saying, but I believe that you saw what you think you saw, and not completely destroy somebody's livelihood like that.
Yeah.
Yes, and that was all part of a federal CIA-funded program that began in 1953.
Yeah.
And, appears they let up on people for about 10 years, from about 2012 or 13, and now they're back at it again.
Yeah.
You'd like to think we'd learned something from the past, but
Do we ever?
no.
Everybody breathed a sigh of relief. They thought there was going to be disclosure.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
that the military has any intention
No.
of disclosing, that the military intelligence and military industrial complex have any intention, that it can't benefit them in any way.
No, they can't weaponize it. They can't, they can't subjugate it, and they can't take it for their own advantage. And I've seen it. I've seen it happen. I know it happens, but it's awful. But in any case, something that isn't awful, the Hill case. The Hill case has been, we're looking at next year, if my math is right, 65 years, right?
Wow, yes.
Isn't that wild?
Yes.
65 years.
65.
Wow.
And it was the first widely publicized alien abduction, or we'll just call it abduction because it's non-human abduction. And it's still to this. In fact, they're making a movie now. I know you have some awareness of this probably, but they're currently making a movie, I think, with Demi Moore and.
Oh, are they?
And I think that's right. But
I read that, but
Yeah.
they're not
Yeah.
making an accurate movie.
I'm
They're
sure it's
using the
not.
names of real people, but the movie is going to be complete science fiction.
That's
Yeah.
terrible.
And
Hollywoodized.
Betty is going to be portrayed as a delusional woman, whereas
Oh, no.
Barney will be portrayed as the man who loved her in a folie à deux.
Mm,
Well, we won't be watching
It's
that one.
heartbreaking.
no.
It is
Yeah.
It really is.
heartbreaking.
It's
I wish I could
unfortunate.
sue. The
Yeah.
I wish
only
you could
the
too.
only thing is you cannot sue for slander of your dead relatives.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so unfortunate.
Yeah.
But with saying that though, 65 years, what do you think, or why do you think it still resonates so heavily? Not just, I think even my mom probably knows who Benny and Barney Hill.
Yeah, the
or
majority of
Betty and
people
Barney Hill.
do.
Right,
Yeah.
most people do. What is it about their story you think that resonates with people almost 65 years later?
Well, I think that it was the first scientifically investigated case of alien abduction, that it was the science involved, that the investigators were in there immediately and collected that evidence. And from Betty and Barney, their testimony. And that, of course, the physical evidence was scientifically evaluated later, not during the initial investigation. There's solid evidence of an Air Force cover-up on this. It's all there. Betty and Barney were highly respected, credible individuals. There was nothing bad you could say about them. They were solid people. Not crazy, like
Right.
this movie wants to portray Betty, at least. I don't know about Barney. But, so and the quality of the investigations.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is legitimate, and I know that there are other abduction stories and other witnesses and other incidences that have happened that have a lot of weight. There's a lot of things to them that are so impressive, but I think with the human element and what Betty and Barney Hill represent, I think that, to me, that's one of the things that's helped it resonate for as long as it has. And it's to the credit of the people that they were, and credit to their legacy that you guys are holding up, and that that you hold dearly, which you should, and that's fantastic. Aside from, like, say, somebody like, and I only bring this up because I'm from Arizona, but Travis Walton was probably one of the first things that I remember reading about being a younger kid. That was a big one for me too. But Betty and Barney Hill, that is probably one of the cornerstone, right, one of the originals. And but when it comes, and we're kind of getting close to the end, but one of the things I'm always curious about, and I know you're not really active, and I don't know if you are or not with MUFON or not, but in all the time that you were there and everything that you experienced and read and researched, what are some of the commonalities between Betty and Barney's incident and sort of the other instances that you reported? What stands out to you as some of the consistencies where you go, okay, there's something connected here?
Well, first of all, let me say that I am a consultant to MUFON's experiencer resource team.
Okay.
So I'm still active in the organization, but I'm no longer doing investigations or support. I've retired. I'm putting together my archival collection at this point.
Right.
So what are the commonalities? Well, one of them is the emotional reaction after this happened. Most people, when they have this kind of experience the first time, and they don't know, they're not familiar, it hasn't happened all of their lives, they will develop trauma. Sometimes when it's happened all of their lives and they weren't aware of it, they develop trauma that they have to work through. And, I always think of the individual. I put the investigation second because I would never want to interrogate someone who was traumatized. I feel they have to work through that trauma first so they won't become more traumatized. So with my background in psychiatric social work, I'm just really a compassionate person. I care about people.
That's awesome. Yeah.
The eyewitness testimony. There were witnesses to the UFO that night. Also, the radar report. That's not very common.
Right.
There are witnesses, but not witnesses to the radar report. Paranormal activity in the home after the event. And it's not all paranormal activity. It's not ghosts and things could fly off shelves, but I think that there's a scientific explanation for that, and I think that it has something to do with electromagnetic energy.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
I mean, I could be wrong, but when I try to figure that out, that's what I come up with, some kind of energy.
For sure.
Being emitted from their bodies or in their
It's stuck with
environment.
them afterwards.
Absolutely.
That makes sense, actually.
Yeah. That's going to leave, it's going to leave some kind of residue, for lack of better words. Even with paranormal ghost hunting, if you will, tongue in cheek, there are a lot of things that can be explained by that very thing, some kind of residual magnetic, whether it be EMF or whatever it is, that can explain quite a bit. That doesn't necessarily need to be, a poltergeist or something like that. But yeah, that's fascinating.
In our study, we discovered that more than 50% of the people who had been taken to craft had a conscious observation, close encounter with a craft prior to being taken. And their family members had also observed craft at close range. And sometimes, in about 50% of the cases, family members had also been taken.
That's what we've heard before.
Yes, that's
it's
something
like
we've
it follows a
definitely heard
family
before.
line. That's so interesting.
Absolutely.
Yes, it does. It seems to be some kind of longitudinal genetic study.
Absolutely. So with the book, and again, it's so awesome that you got a chance to kind of revise it and do some things. What do you hope people can get? What is the message, and where would you like to see people get out of the book that you haven't already talked about?
There's so much there in detail, who Betty and Barney were, what happened, the investigation, the radar reports, a little bit about the witnesses, all the new scientific investigation of the evidence. And also, when I wrote the first book, I wasn't so clearly aware of a concerted effort by a skeptical group to dissuade the public from believing this was real, and the way that they invented a false narrative to fill in what really happened, and how they promoted it, and how they said there was no evidence, and how they said that they only saw a light in the sky, how they said that Betty had the dreams but had no conscious recall of anything that happened before the dreams, and that same with Barney. I mean, they have so much false information out there that has the public believing, and even the archivist, even people who are going to have from the city of Portsmouth, who are going to have an exhibit on them next year, are so totally confused. They've been persuaded by skeptics that what happened did not happen.
That's awful.
Yeah.
It's terribly frustrating
Yes.
when you're trying to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And trying to disseminate that truth to the public, at least the interested public.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think nowadays
There's a lot more interest.
there's a lot more interest. And I guess in closing, and it's actually great because it kind of leads into the last question I wanted to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
With what's going on in today's world with UFO and ufology and everything that we've all kind of been digesting for the last 5 or plus years, how do you think they would feel about what's kind of going on right now?
Oh, boy, it's hard to say. I know that they would both be interested in this. I think that Barney would be relieved, because after this was made public against his will, he was criticized publicly. People didn't believe him, and especially the skeptics worked on him to convince the public that he was a weak man, which he absolutely was not, and that he would believe anything that Betty told him, which he absolutely did not. I knew Barney very well. But Barney would be pleased to see that these people who are military officers, retired, have sworn to under oath that this has happened. And not only that they are aware of UFOs, but many of them have been abducted. Many of them have had their own experiences. So I think that Betty and Barney would be gratified to know that it wasn't just them, that there were other credible people who have evidence, who would be believed because of their level of outstanding history in their professions.
Yeah, that sense of vindication.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, Kathleen, can't thank you enough for spending some time with us.
It's been amazing.
It's one of those incidences and stories that once you get into the paranormal and once you understand ufology, you realize how important their story was and continues to be. And we appreciate you spending time with us tonight.
It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully, are you working on any books, or what are you doing? I know you said something about coming through with some new things. What do you have going on?
I am working on a number of different projects that are tearing me in all different directions, and you'll hear about them later on. One that I can talk about is that I'm putting together my archival collection.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Where can our audience kind of catch up with you? How can they reach out to you and
Buy all your
buy your books
Yeah.
and kind of get involved in what you got going on.
All of my books are available at Amazon in all formats. Also,
Okay.
many other online outlets. You can purchase autographed copies of my books online at my website, Kathleen-Marden, MARDEN.com. As long as you live in the United States. I can't mail them outside the United States because it would cost you a fortune. It's
Yeah.
beginning to cost more in the U.S.
Yes, it is.
kidding, I know.
Yes.
But I haven't
Jeez.
increased prices.
Good for you.
So I hope I don't have to.
I hope you
But
don't
you'll
either.
find those books on my website, Kathleen-Marden.com, along with a lot of very interesting information. I keep working on the website to update it, upgrade it with new documents.
Yeah, I was just thinking we probably need to update ours too, but
It's always
yeah,
progress.
it's a never-ending never-ending
Mhm.
thing. But
It
again,
is.
thank you so
Yeah,
much for
thank you
spending
so
time with
much.
us today, and we wish you all the luck going forward, and hopefully get to speak with you again soon someday.
Yes, I would love to do that again. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you. You have a great night.
You too.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Really can't thank her enough. I mean, just the amount of history,
I
and
know.
the
And
things
she was there
she was there.
when it happened.
Yeah. Again, folks, whether you believe in ufology, whether you believe in all things that we talk about, and I know some of you probably are very skeptic, and that's fine. But I think the one thing that she brings to the table and the experience is it's a very human experience.
hmm
These were people that are upstanding individuals. They they weren't looking for this,
No, they're
and
terrified.
yeah, they were petrified, and they were trying to make sense of something that even today we have a hard time making sense of, let alone
Mhm.
1961.
I can't imagine. And, with Kathleen being a child, essentially, when this happened, you think about these experiences we have as children. And something that I brought up with her is like, we don't really think about them as kids. We kind of forget about it in that adolescence period.
Right.
Whether you're going to college or just moving out and you're doing all that stuff, but this stuff always comes back.
It sure does.
It comes back either in memories or like something triggers it and you start thinking about it because you start questioning about life, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're finding yourself.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's interesting with her. She was just like kind of pushed it away and it came back. It always comes
Absolutely.
back. And most of our lives that are in paranormal investigation or whatever it may be, it's those early experiences always. And imagine having your aunt and uncle come back and say this happened, especially in the 1960s
Yeah.
when it wasn't being talked about that much.
And
I
you
mean,
had
what
so
would
much to
you
lose.
think? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what I'd think, but I'll tell you what, I know that I'm so glad that she was able to get all this information.
Mhm.
I'm so grateful that Betty and Barney were able to be that, I guess, the frontiers people of trying to get ufology out there and get it
Yeah.
understood. Although I know in the beginning they didn't want that. That wasn't what they were looking for.
No, but they, in reading the book, she goes into depth of everything that they went through in trying to report this the correct way,
Right.
what they were being
Exactly.
told to do.
Right.
And of course, as expected,
Big surprise.
yeah. Oh, this is just a this, and this was a weather balloon. I think
Yeah.
that's what the Project Blue Book actually said. It was a weather
Weather
balloon or
balloon.
some
Boy, they
crap.
love that weather balloon, don't
They
they?
do, but a weather balloon gets around is all I got to say.
I mean, honestly, how many freaking weather balloons are we
No.
going to shoot down or whatever?
I know,
Oh,
but it's just like, they tried to do it the correct way, and then, of course, somebody whistleblowed on them
yeah.
and embarrassed them, made them look ridiculous, and, it's the classic story of what
Yeah.
always happens. At least now it's starting to get better. When people say they see stuff, it's not, like, "Oh, well, maybe it actually happened."
Yeah.
But for their time period,
That was
I
not the
cannot even
case.
imagine what they went through.
No.
No.
But guys, listen. The book captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience. Please go out there and get it.
Yeah.
As Kathleen said, there's new stuff in there.
Mhm.
It's been revised, and not only you get a chance to understand, arguably, like we said, one of the most important UFO incidences and abduction we've ever had, but you get to know some of the science behind it and what we even use to this day.
Yeah, it's very thorough. It's a
Mhm.
very thorough, well-researched book, and it shows you all the comparisons of what they said here and there, and then during the hypnosis, and the response from all these different little factions that they went through.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely check it out. And I'm going to repeat her website again. It's www.kathleen-marden, marden.com.
Yeah.
And you can find all her works there.
Yeah, and it sounds like this archival thing that's going to happen is
Yeah,
going to be amazing.
it's gonna be big.
Yeah. But guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Thank you for really just being a part of this great interview, and we hope you liked it. And yeah, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.